welcome to a guide on how to become better with Ares. To start us off, let's go over some tips and tricks with him. Then we'll go over good matchups and counters, leveling, good items on him, and finally laning and team fighting for those of you who play Conquest. Ares has a few cool tricks up his chains. For one, his ult has some pretty awesome interactions. For example, did you know that you could pull Wukong out of his ult if he's mid-jump? Or that you can pull Athena back in after she ults away? See, the cool thing about Ares ult, unlike Daji's, is that the ult can't be cleansed off of you. So if you time it right, then you can pull players back in even after their CC immunity is over. That leads me to this next very important trick. Whenever you chain an enemy, chances are they're gonna have to beat it to jump or dash away. In this time, you should immediately ult them to pull them back in. Now, why does this work? Well, Ares has a 2.5 second channel duration on his ult. Beads last 2 seconds. So if you ult them right when they beads, there's about a 0.5 second difference between their immunity fading and you pulling. So if they don't have any other form of immunity, you'll be able to pull them every single time. Here's a tip for you. If you space out your chains perfectly on a target, then you'll be crippling them for about 8 seconds, versus if you spam chain them. Spam chaining is also bad damage-wise because the chains don't stack, and when a new chain hits the same target that's already chained, then the chain is essentially replaced with a new one. So you're not stacking the damage, you're replacing it. A chain lasts 4 seconds on a target, and you get 2 seconds to fire a new one if the previous one hits. So if you're chaining a single target, a good tip is to chain, then auto, then chain. This will space your chains out pretty evenly, giving you about 6 to 8 seconds of cripple time, depending on how long you space them out for. Oh, and you'll do more damage too, since each chain will stay on the target for a longer period of time and you'll be getting auto damage off as well. Another tip is knowing when to activate Ares' second ability. This gives him and his allies protections, HP 5, and most importantly for this tip, CCR. CCR stands for crowd control reduction, so you're reducing the duration of hard crowd control on you. Ares' 2 is 30% CCR, meaning that any hard CC will have about a 30% reduced duration. Try to make sure you're activating this before you get CC'd. This could be as you go in or waiting for a few seconds, but try to predict when enemies are going to CC you or an ally and try to look to activate this ahead of time, so you can reduce the overall duration of it. Ares is a pretty simple character, so there aren't too many tips I have for you, but my main last one is a perfect hit dump on a target should look something like this. This is the best way to maximize his damage output on any enemy. Now we're on to matchups. A good rule of thumb I usually have for him is if they have some form of dash or leap in their kit that can be crippled, then Ares is good into that character. Believe it or not, Ares is a counterpick to most frontline warriors and guardians, purely because of his lockdown potential with his chains. He's even better when they don't have any CC immunity in their kits too, so he can either force beats with his ult or pull them every time. Some examples Ares would be good into are Atlas, Maui, Horus, and Cerberus. However, despite being good into more dash-oriented characters, Ares does have his fair share of bad matchups or counters. For example, characters like Baron, Ymir, Kabrakan, and Yamoja are all very tough for Ares. The reason being is because the way their kits are structured. First off, the one thing all these characters have in common is that they don't care about his chains. None of them have escapes or escapes that can actually be crippled out. They also have heavy lockdown for characters that don't have escapes themselves, like Ares. Baron can easily root Ares and pull Ares in whenever he wants with his ult. Kabrakan, Yamoja, and Ymir all have walls and have some form of slower pull to prevent Ares from being able to move effectively. And of course, there are more characters that counter Ares. The main signs I would look for are, do they care about his chains? Do they have roots, slows, or pulls? These are the questions you should be thinking about when it comes to matchups versus Ares. I think a lot of people get stuck on the fact that Ares is mainly good into characters that have no CC immune ults, and while yes this is the case, Ares' best ability is his chains because of its ability to lock down and prevent players from using their get out jail free card, in other words their escape. As for leveling, Ares is pretty straightforward. I would start your 3, this is going to be your main clear, for both minions and jungle camps. And I would put 2 points into your chains because you're essentially doubling your chain damage from level 1 to level 2. At level 4, put a point into your 2, and of course at level 5 get your ult. From here max your chains, then the next part is up to you, but I like to max my 2 for the extra protections for both you and your allies. To me this matters more in the early game since players don't really have their percent pen online yet. Then I max his flames 3rd, and finally I max out the ult. You could max flames before his 2, but I wouldn't recommend maxing them before his chains. Ares chains do an absurd amount of damage if used correctly. Next I want to go over some of the good items on Ares. We should all know by now that Ares gains power from building aura items. This is his passive. While these items are good on him, they aren't required. Typically I like to build a mixture of aura and cooldown. I don't really build aura for its passive, I do it because I'm a support, and the extra power is just icing on the cake. I mainly like to look for cooldown on him, since you want his chains to be up as quickly as possible, especially if you miss them. So items such as Pridwin, Relic Dagger, and Spirit Rope are all good cooldown items on him. If you're feeling spicy or you're ahead, going a damage item like Spirit Dessa would be really nice to have. You could go Cloak on him as well, but I just prefer Thieves as my initial stacking item since Cloak I feel is hard to stack on him. I also prefer Sentinel's Embrace since it's going to provide you those extra prots and aura. Of course you can build other items on him, but these are the main ones I typically look for. But it all depends on the comp you're going against, so don't feel like you have to build everything that I mentioned. Make sure the items you're building are appropriate for the game that you're in. Finally, we're going to go over laning and team fighting. Ares' laning is pretty straightforward. When you get to lane, your main form of clear onto the wave is just going to be your 3. One tip I have for this though, is just to push the front minions with your flames until they get pushed back enough to be grouped with the back minions. Then you can hit the rest with your remaining flame time. The reason why I suggest this is because it groups the wave up, it makes clear easier for you and your ADC. And of course, always be trying to chain both enemies if you can while reducing the amount of poke you take. But for laning, that's going to be about it. Just play like you would any other support. Ares has good clear, good fight, and great early pressure, so you should be winning lane versus most matchups. In terms of his teamfight, what I suggest is go blink if they have characters without CC immunity in their kit. This is going to force them to burn beads every time or get pulled if they don't have them up. The blink makes engaging very easy and hard to play around, which is why I suggest it if they don't have CC immunity. Other than that, I like to go relics that help buff Ares and his allies in combat, such as Sprint, Shell, or Slow Curse. Ares is really good at locking down frontline, so try to stay on the frontliners. Remember, look for players that have dashes and prevent them from using them. This is going to make their fight a lot harder because they won't have a way to engage onto your allies as easily, and if they're on your allies, you're preventing them from being able to get away and making them easier to hit since they're slowed. So I suggest sort of playing in the mid ground because you're not really a peel heavy character, but you have good lockdown onto mobility characters, and you want to get as many players in with your ult as possible. You also don't have an escape, which means you're easy to poke out, so you want to be careful positioning too far up unless you're looking for a massive ult. Alright everyone, so that's going to be the guide. If you remember what you learned throughout this video, you should have a really good grasp on how to play Ares effectively. Smite really is a learn as you play kind of game, so I can't really teach you everything about every situation you're going to be in with Ares, but the more situations you encounter with him, the more you're going to understand how to maneuver him in those situations. So thank you guys so much for watching, I really appreciate it as always, and I hope you found this guide to be useful. Until next time, see ya!